From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
A new Kansas law is used potentially for the first time in Finney County to combat human trafficking. Plus, a new school year means a new schedule for students in the Argonia School District. But first, a week since the raid of a newspaper in Marion County. The investigation, reaction, and how the paper got its equipment back. We're talking about all of this and more on Kansas Week. I'm Jackson Overstreet, and this is Kansas Week. Now, the eyes of the world, or at least the world of journalists, have been on the city of Marion after the city's police department confiscated several computers from the local paper, The Record. Cake's Nick Nelson details how it all played out and how the paper's possessions were returned.
We will bring it back down here and put it back to use, which will be a welcome sight for us.
Marion County record publisher Eric Meyer said Wednesday his legal team has asked for the equipment taken in Friday's police raid to be looked at by forensic experts to make sure the Marion Police Department didn't tamper with it. These pictures from the Kansas Reflector show the undersheriff taking the seized equipment from a storage locker to Kansas City to be analyzed. Wednesday, the county attorney and the KBI ruled there was insufficient evidence for police to raid the newspaper. Meyer says the KBI director is doing what's right.
He quickly arranged for a re-examination of how the search was conducted, why it was conducted, and that search working with the county attorney. I think it ultimately was the county attorney's decision, but there was a recommendation from KBI that influenced that strongly.
Michelle Avis is a former reporter at the Hillsborough Free Press and came by the newspaper offices to offer her support and pay respects to Joanne Meyer, who died shortly after the raid.
It was incredibly unfair, such a thing to happen, that this lady had lived this long and done so much for the community, to have this happen to her.
Now, we have a lot to discuss this week and several topics, including Marion. And let's start with, we have with us Dr. Russell Alban Fox, a political science professor from Friends University, as well as Wichita City Councilman Brandon Johnson. Over here, we have Representative Nick Hoheisel, a Republican from here in Wichita. And so, again, thank you all for being here. And we started in Marion because the eyes, really, I mean, every single news station, had some sort of look here in Marion. First, it's kind of been a week since everything happened. Walk me through kind of what was kind of the initial reaction, what you all saw from what happened in Marion. Anyone start with your representative?
So I kind of followed this story. Saturday morning, I kind of started reading on it. Put a tweet out on social media saying, I'm keeping my eye on this story. I want to see what unfolds. By Sunday afternoon, I put out a longer thread on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, just talking about the fact that the First Amendment freedom of press is paramount to our democracy and to our nation. And it's clear that there were oversteps within this process. Now, I do know that it sounds like there may have been a investigation. There may be, and I know KBI is investigating now, so there may have been a crime committed of some kind. We have processes within the state and within this country and laws that protect the press from these type of raids. And if there is a crime that is suspected to be committed, you go and you get a subpoena from the courts. What happened here was a gross overstep by the government, the folks in Marion County. It is unfortunate Miss Myers passed away due to this, and our thoughts and prayers are, of course, with her. But this is a broad, way overreaching overstep by the Marion County. I called for transparency. Sunday, I said I wanted to see the probable cause affidavit, and now I asked that Sunday, put it out there, and I know folks have all week have been working on getting that. It is now Friday. We have yet to see that.
And so, going off that, as a member of the legislature, is this something you think maybe you and other members will look at changing, increasing protections of the First Amendment, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we also still, we are still early in this process, so we do need to see what happens, what the investigation uncovers. But yeah, no, I think we should go back, and if there's anything we need to clarify to make sure this does not happen again, we need to do it. I think there's individuals that need to be held accountable for this within the city of Marion government. And again, if the news reporter did break the law as some think. She should be held accountable as well. But also, I do want to point out as well, I've seen a lot of discussion in the last week because this all spun off of a Jake LaTurner event a few weeks ago, Congressman LaTurner. And I've seen folks on the left try to attack or go after Jake LaTurner. Jake LaTurner had nothing to do with any of this. In fact, Jake LaTurner, when this all went down that day, and the reporter was removed from the Jake LaTurner event, Jake LaTurner apologized, went to the Record and gave a one-on-one interview with the Record after. So I need that clarified too, that Congressman LaTurner really didn't have anything to do with this, and it's unfair to cast that upon him.
Picking up on what Nick just said, I think that one of the reasons why this story blew up so largely, so quickly, is because, and other people have already commented on that, it fits so many pre-existing stereotypes, you know. So of course, you know, liberals, people on the left, progressives are going to connect this with Jake LaTurner because they already have this image of mind about small town cops, corruption, collusion with the Republican Party, that sort of thing. But then of course, you know, part of the reason why you had this kind of massive overstep is because on the other side of the aisle you have similar stereotypes. Oh, you know, journalists are troublemakers, journalists never obey the rules, you know, journalists think they can get away with anything. We're going to, you know, punish these people. We're going to hold them accountable. And so part of the context behind this whole event are long-standing cultural stereotypes that unfortunately a lot of people seem to have bought quickly into. I mean, some of the participants in the event probably to a certain extent were motivated by exactly those things.
And I know one thing that we saw was interesting. Sherman Smith put out a bunch of tweets. One of them was one of the staff members at the Record was wearing a Trump 2024 shirt. Marion County is a conservative part of the state. So you're seeing reaction from both sides of the aisle that this was a nonpartisan issue. It was just a step too far. Does that kind of show that even though there are some who are more conservative who maybe view journalists as going too far, that stuff like this isn't tolerated when it comes to no matter what the political spectrum is?
I don't think you can ever entirely disentangle those sorts of things. People are going to be looking at, you know, they're looking for evidence, you know, to confirm their priors, the T-shirts, the dinner, you know, this, you know, is clearly a major mistake by the law enforcement in Marion County, but the fire behind the reception of this mistake is, you know, a reflection of all of these things that, you know, for instance, you know, folks are tweeting about, like, I saw this, I saw that, and so forth.
And Brandon, if you want to get anything, you can, or else then the next topic you were a direct voter on, and we can move on to that as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to move on, only because my role with C-Post and the law enforcement's involvement in this. I want to get all the facts before I comment too much on it.
And again, I just want to reiterate, transparency is key on this issue.
Yes.
There has to be transparency.
And I think we all can agree that is something most important now. Something switching again to a little bit closer to home here in Wichita. The Wichita Wind Surge have been growing in attendance every year since the team has come to town. However, development around the ballpark has not been able to capture that momentum. KSN's Samantha Boring details how that may be changing.
Wichita's downtown riverfront to soon see changes. A hotel, parking garage, retail, and apartments. Issues with inflation and the supply chain created financial challenges for WRLP.
Just seemed like at the end of the day, this was the best path forward that would accomplish what the original goals were in 2019.
Wichita City Councilman Jeff Bluebob wants to see promises from 2019 stay.
I think that's a step in the right direction. I think it's a lot better step than putting offices around there around the ballpark. I guess I'm becoming very impatient. I think the public's becoming very impatient, and we want to see some development down there.
He says 75 parking spots were promised, and he's upset that nothing's in writing to preserve those spots.
You can't be disingenuous to those folks that have been here and grown their businesses well before we had a new ballpark.
City Council wants to move forward with the project to bring in revenue to pay back the money used to build the stadium.
Now this next phase, getting the hotel constructed, getting the apartments constructed, getting the retail, that just adds to that entire catalyst. And then we'll continue to see further.
While the Wind Surge team is no longer directly involved with the project, the president says they want to stay in the loop as changes will impact the team.
It'll be exciting to see what happens.
City Council members say they're hopeful EPC will follow through for this land and promises made. Here for you, Samantha Boring, KSN News 3.
And we have a man who directly voted on this issue just earlier this week, and so Councilman Johnson, you were one of the yes votes on it. How confident are you in EPC to kind of move forward in this and kind of after everything's kind of played out as it has with this ballpark?
I'm fairly confident in EPC. They've already been a part of development in the area. They've been working throughout this entire time on plans. We've seen some of those plans. We know that there's still a hotel on the anchor, so I know that they're anxious to get started. And again, we want to see the area around the ballpark develop. That's a part of the lure of the area. The team has been doing great. As we talked about, attendance has continued to go up, and I think that development makes it even better. And maybe we even will spark just north of the ballpark some development there as well.
Absolutely, but there also has been a lot of frustration with this project since I think the moment is now it's the $1 cost with everything, and that's still being transferred in that way. You heard it from your fellow councilman there, Bluebaugh, talking about just the frustration of the wait in this starting and stopping. How do you address some of that frustration from the public when it comes to this?
Well, you know, we didn't probably do the best job of explaining that $1 an acre. It's easy to tell someone that, but that's why I always ask the question, what else comes with that? You can take $1 tomorrow, but if you can't commit $100 million in development, you won't get that land. And that's part of it. Of course, we had COVID, we had some different setbacks. We all want to see that develop sooner, but we do believe EPC will make that happen. And we also showed that we learned from lessons of the past. So if something were not to go right, we'd be able to purchase that land back at $1. That's what we just did. We just purchased it back at $1 and then we sold it again for $1. So we have all the right things in the contract to make it happen. What we learned about immense or starting construction, we changed that in the new contract as well. So you actually have to go vertical now. You know, it won't be able to just put up a fence and then say that construction started. So we've learned from our mistakes. We're making things better, and I'm very confident EPC is going to get started.
Representative,
You couldn't ask double the price and ask for $2. I share some frustration with Councilmember Bluebaugh. I think my brother, the council member as well, was very frustrated about this whole process. But at the end of the day, it's the best out of all the worst situations there are. I agree with going from the office to the apartment complex. I agree with that. I think that's a good move. I have talked to several members of the Delano business community, and parking is a concern there. So I'm hopeful that that will get addressed in future plans. But yeah, I mean, eventually those star bonds are going to have to be paid back, and sooner rather than later. So it's time to get the ball rolling.
absolutely. Well, now students are on Argonia back to school this week, and while most of them what they experienced last year is the same, there is one big change. They're only going to school 4 days a week.
If it's not underlined, I'm okay with that.
It's the third day of class at Argonia High School, and sophomore Rhett Reagan says he's happy to be back.
It's been nice. Everyone's get to see everyone again. That's awesome.
With it being so early, Reagan is getting back into the groove of classes. And this year, there was a big change for him and his fellow classmates. They only have to go to school Tuesday through Friday.
At first, it was like, why? Because we didn't know exactly why, and I still don't really know why.
To answer Reagan's question, District Superintendent Rustin Clark says the switch was made for 2 reasons.
We were starting to look at some things that might help retain staff, attract students.
The school year has only just started, but Clark believes the move might already be helping. He had no openings going into the start of the year.
Now, whether that was a direct result or just coincidence, but it was. We did get some comments from applicants even this year. So I think it's already made a little bit of a difference.
Clark says to make up for the 4-day week, the district has extended the hours of each day by 25 minutes and added 6 extra days of classes.
The research is fairly clear that there's not a decline unless there's a decline in time. So if we could figure out a way to keep the time the same, we weren't going to see that decline in achievement.
Clark believes if this goes well, it'll become more of a trend in Kansas. As for Reagan, he's keeping an open mind about the change, but is excited so far.
I think it'll hopefully make me a little more energized.
Now, I reported on this week. I found this very interesting, just the fact that they're moving to this, but they believe it will not cut back on student achievement. We're seeing this in Independence, Missouri, some other schools throughout the region. Is this something that we might see more in Kansas, especially in these kind of rural districts?
So, I mean, I look at this and I can see it in a couple of different ways. I mean, as a teacher myself, I think about it in terms of pedagogy. we're always experimenting, and we're always thinking about different ways of organizing the time that we have with students, rethinking not just curricula, but the structure of the classrooms. And in this case, a pretty big change, increasing the amount of time that you spend in particular class periods, changing the length of the week overall. There's some really good data out there that pertains to these kinds of structural changes. When does the school day begin? How long does it go? That sort of thing. So as a matter of pedagogy, I'm very interested to see what comes out of this. But politically, I also recognize that the reason why these sorts of things are even on the table in the first place is because of, longstanding frustrations, concerns, fears people have about school funding, about staffing issues, and so forth. And that's not to say that one is directly connected to another, but the fact of the matter is that people have been talking about 4-day school weeks. They've been talking about different structural changes for a very, very long time. But people also get used to the way things are. If you're going to upset the apple cart, that's usually because people have come to recognize that we're simply not going to be able to staff these classes. We're not going to be able to pay for the school bus coverage that we need. We're missing bus drivers. We're concerned about what's going to happen next fiscal year or the fiscal year after that. So politically, I recognize that this, to a certain extent, has been driven by, maybe not immediately driven, but in the larger sense, it's been driven by a variety of these concerns people have. Pedagogically, it may be a really good solution, but the solution is coming forward because people have to deal with a larger problem.
I am interested to see how this goes. I have a few concerns, but one main concern is I'm worried about those children that rely on those meals on 5 days a week, those breakfast, those lunch school meals, on reduced lunches or free lunches. I was one of those kids, and there were times where those meals were the only meals I had. So I'm wondering, I'm curious to know how on that extra day off, how those meals are, if they have a program in place to address that.
So I can tell you with Argonia that they're offering daycare for every family that needs it. I know some of the other plans, so that was addressed that, but not every school district might do that. And so when you hear that this was an attempt by them to have better teacher retention and kind of work through that as part of the legislature who funds schools, is this something that you may start to look at as, well, either the funding source and how to get more teachers in the classroom, or what is this kind of set off, going back to
we've fully funded our schools for the last 5 years. Every year I've been up there, we've actually fully funded our schools, minus special education. So this may be something that we may take a look at, see how successful this is. Myself, I kind of still prefer the 5-day work week or a school week, but I'm open to seeing how this goes.
When you had the little slip of the tongue there, this also comes off, we're seeing a lot more 4-day work weeks becoming more in vogue, especially over in Europe, but we're seeing a little bit here. Is this kind of a new trend that we might start seeing over the next 5-10 years with remote work, with things like that we start seeing a big cultural shift to that 4-day and giving an extra day off?
I think that really depends on the supportive services that you mentioned that Argonia is doing. It'd be really tough for parents who have to work 5 days if their children are only going to school for 4 days and there's no assistance there, or folks who can afford daycare. That'd be a struggle. So we'll all have to move lockstep towards that, I think, for it to be effective.
We call the 4-day work week the Wichita City Council work week.
I'll give you a chance to respond, but I think we also have to move on a little bit. Now, 2 people were arrested by Findlay County Sheriff's Office earlier this week and charged with several counts of human trafficking, as well as the newly created human smuggling charge. KSN's Derek Lytle explains.
Responding to a tenant dispute, deputies found poor living conditions and people sleeping on the floor.
Walking into it initially, there's just no furniture, no home furnishings in the home. And it's just very overwhelming to see the number of people living in one location.
The sheriff's office reaching out to local churches and other organizations to find ways to support the victims' basic needs. The Live Well Finney Health Coalition has also started raising funds.
Live Well has generously offered to accept any donations once we determine what's actually needed for our victims.
A local advocate says the individuals will have many needs moving forward.
They need some kind of mental health assistance, therapy, counseling, anything like that. Aside from that, food, shelter, personal hygiene, clothing is it's a big one.
She plans to work with law enforcement to work with individuals who could need help to get legal citizenship.
So they would apply for that T visa, is what it's most famous for. That T visa comes with a employment authorization document where they are eligible to work and maintain it's a protection barrier to be in the United States.
Here for you, Derek Lytle, KSN News 3.
Now, one of your colleagues in the State House, Representative Stephen Owens, who was a big part of this bill, talked about this is probably the first charge under that Human Smuggling Act. Is this the intent of the bill when you all passed it out of the State House this year?
Yeah, this was the exact intent. This is what we were trying to capture with that legislation. Now, when we first introduced it and were working it on the House floor, there were some concerns that it was overly broad. We did go back, we tightened it up a little bit, and then we passed it. It went to the governor's desk. The governor vetoed it. We were able to override that veto, and it became law on July 1. And these are the cases that we are trying to target here. Before this, Kansas did not have a human smuggling law of any kind. Now, if there is concerns, there's still concerns by folks that this may still be overly broad, and we can always go back next year with the trailer bill and tighten it up more. But these situations right here, these folks need to be held accountable for what they're doing. They are taking advantage of these immigrants, and they need to be held accountable, and that's what this law is designed to do.
You mentioned some of those concerns, though. I know Wichita Police Department, Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office had a big news conference earlier this year talking about some of the concerns our Latino population had because of just people living in their home and kind of how broad this bill was. Seeing this, maybe showing this to the police chief that this is how it's supposed to be used, does that give you confidence that this bill will be done properly as well here in Sedgwick County?
It gives me confidence in this instance that it was done right, and I hope that it continues to be. But I think the chief and sheriff are right to continue to talk about broad terms, and it gives the legislature something to think about to tighten things up. Again, this worked right this time, and it's good to continue to think through how can we make sure that it stays that way and we don't see the things that folks are concerned about.
Now, college football will be kicking off in just a few weeks, and the University of Kansas has announced major plans for a remodeling of the football stadium there in Lawrence. KAKE Sports Director Sully Engels details the project for us.
Since Lance Leipold's arrival and really the turnaround of the football program, it's felt like a new era here in Lawrence. But today, it was a revolutionary time as the gateway to the school was introduced and major renovations to David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium were announced.
Generational, transformational, historic, and a day that I really believe we'll look back on some years down the road, and only then will we grasp the significance of this launch point.
KU football has its new home, and the university has its new entrance in the gateway.
This exceptional project will pay heed to our tradition and heritage while revealing a new KU.
That's something Lawrence native and all-conference running back Devin Neal dreamed of when he committed here over other programs people said he should go to. He wanted to change the program at KU and the culture, and he's seeing it done right in front of his eyes.
Everything on and off the field has been nothing but positive. The momentum was already real, but today it went to another level. Sitting here and seeing the future of David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium in the Gateway District gives me chills for what's ahead. We're laying another brick today, and it is a major one.
The bricks will continue to be laid, but the foundation can only be so strong if the product on the field matches it. Lance Leipold knows the stadium will literally be
game-changing. It's a game changer. It shows that this university and administration is committed to being successful in Power 5 football. This is a statement to recruit for recruiting, to maintaining staff members, of course, in our fan base.
The stadium will hold more than 40,000 fans and be very high-tech, even down to the calls from the fans for Wi-Fi. Travis Goss says they'll make it as big as they feel is reasonable, but it's time for the KU faithful to return the favor and continue to pack the booth.
And so in a lot of ways, it's up to our fans. Are we going to fill this thing up every game? If we do, I'm really confident we're going to design an east and or a south that will accommodate a greater capacity potentially, but that'll be for a different day. And in the meantime, we got seats available, so we need people to step up and support this program starting this fall at a higher level.
Reporting from Lawrence, Sully Engels, Fox Kansas Sports.
An absolutely major project for one of the flagship colleges here in Kansas. And Representative, there was some money allocated from the state, some ARPA funds and all that to go to this project. Do you view this as a good investment, you know, for this economic district and for the stadium and all the renovations?
I think so. Even in KU, who has had a lot of down years recently in football, it's still a game day experience. It still brings a lot of people in. I've driven up from Wichita to games before, and it also brings new folks into KU from out of state. So I'm hopeful that this will be a good investment. I think it was about $35 million. And state funds that we kicked in here, and they were ARPA funds. So I'm excited for them. That's a big stadium. They need to win football games to fill it. So, you know, hopefully they have another good year this year.
They are trying to capture the momentum of last year. Now, Dr. Fox, I think it gets sticky when people see public money going to stadiums and all that. I think especially if we saw this going towards, let's say, bringing the Chiefs to Kansas, there'd be some issues that. With this being a college and all that, and the fact that they are building a district kind of out of this, does that kind of get a pass by people in Kansas, or is this still going to be kind of an issue?
I mean, the data that I'm familiar with shows that there's no real distinction between heavily subsidizing, you know, civic improvements in terms of baseball stadiums and heavily subsidizing colleges and universities in terms of brand new football stadiums. The fact of the matter is that, yeah, I mean, they're appealing. People are going to like the experience. It's maybe going to increase, you know, overall attendance to a marginal amount, but ultimately the attendance is going to be driven by something entirely separate from the quality of the stadium. It's going to be driven by people's interest in the team. People that take a look at athletic venues as some kind of activator that's going to create all sorts of positive economic results, the data just isn't there to support it. It's not a particularly good bet, generally speaking.
Well, I think hopefully the KU is hoping build off a little bit of the momentum here with the team this last year, and while it may not be a good economic bank, at least get more people into Lawrence and all that, and like hopefully act as a recruiting tool for other students. Well, that wraps us up for this week. Thanks again for joining us this week, Brandon, Russell, and Nick. And we'd also like to thank our news partners at the Wichita Eagle, KSN News, and Cake News for sharing their materials with us. And we'd also love to continue this discussion with you online. Just look out for PBS Kansas on most social media platforms and be sure to reach out to us. But for now, stay safe and have a great week.